Welcome to Sleepdrunk.
Where I'm debating downing a whole bottle of nature-made brand adult melatonin gummies because my sleep schedule has been just a bit ass lately. Just a bit.
And I'm assuming we'll get into that on Discussion Ed.
Yes, we will. But I think first, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to today. Today's episode, I'm not gonna call it special because it's not, but me and Alex are gonna, I guess, give you guys the fundamentals on some of our hobbies. I'll be doing music, and Alex will be doing photography. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So I guess without further ado, let's go into my fundamental guide to music. Now, I want to put a few prefaces before I really get into it. I think first off, this is not going to be about specifics in music. This isn't going to be like how to read or what an inverted E sharp major 7 sharp 5 flat 9 is.
I was just worried to comment on that.
If you're wondering, it is this. Instead, I'm going to take a more broad and meta look about how to go about learning music and developing in music and kind of getting a path set to let you grow through whatever means you want to go to, because music is such a huge, diverse art form. And in addition, I think just for full transparency, I'll give you guys my background. I've been playing saxophone for roughly 10 years. That's kind of the amount of time I'm drawing on. I've been doing mostly saxophone, a little bit of bass and guitar, and it's been a lot of jazz and concert music. Of course, there has been throat singing as well. But this is kind of, this is the experience that I'm drawing from my experience and the experience of everyone around me, like my bandmates, my brother who is a musician as well. I'm just drawing from all of that to hopefully create a nice, cohesive, comprehensive guide on how to really get started in this wonderful, wonderful hobby. I think this can really be for anyone. I think if you've never had any musical inclinations in your entire life, I feel like even this could even help you. So, I'm going to first off start by saying I want you to ask yourself a question, and that is, why? Why are you learning how to make music? Because the reason you should ask this question is because it helps create a guiding star that can help you, that dictates the direction you want to go, and can be this point of focus when you're having tough times. So, do you want to impress someone? Do you want to learn something new? Do you want to learn a specific song or play in a concert hall or in a steamy jazz club? All of those are valid reasons. If you just want to be the guy that can play Wonderwall at a party, I hate you, but more power to you. That's a perfectly valid reason. So next, you're going to want to look at... yes?
That's why I'm here, but go on.
All right, Alex. You might find a bomb in your mail in a few weeks.
Really, will I?
Maybe. 50-50. So the next thing you want to look at is what? What discipline do you want to get into? What genre? Once again, what settings you want to play into? Because, for example, if you want to play in a mariachi band and you want to play guitar, you'll have a totally different set of requirements than if you want to play on stage in a rock concert. Those are going to be very different worlds, even though it's the same instrument. And this helps you get a very concrete understanding of the potential paths you can take going forward and what's available for your best results for what you want to do. For example, just using that previous example, the mariachi band versus the rock concert, you'd want to buy an acoustic guitar with, I believe, nylon strings versus a electric guitar with crushed strings for that. Next, I think, is probably the single most important aspect of musical fundamentals, and it's something I wish I did. I really wish I did starting up, because I think this hindered my growth a lot. Listen to just everything, right? Listen to the greats in your genre, the greats in your discipline. Listen to just random stuff. Listen to completely different instruments, completely different genres. Just listen to music, because as musicians, we're standing on basically all of human history. We're standing on the shoulders of giants, and we're basing this on, for example, the saxophone is a 200-year-old instrument, just about 200 years old. So it's good to be able to draw on all of that history and apply that to when you're playing it. Of course, I'm not going to find a 200-year-old saxophone recording, because recording wasn't a thing back then. But for example, John Coltrane, Sonny Stitt, Sonny Rollins, I want to say, Art Pepper's, all these great musicians. So I think whatever you want to do, listen to the greats of your discipline, so like instrument, singing, whatever. Listen to the greats in your genre. So my example, jazz, right? Miles Davis, Chuck Mangione is one of my personal heroes, even though he's not even a saxophonist. John Coltrane, as previously mentioned, Cannonball Adderley. Those are all greats in that genre. So just listen. It'll help you so much. It'll help you so much more than you think. Because I think a lot of people, they'll hear one or two songs and then they'll just kind of like decide to putz forward and emulate those songs. But that creates a very, very narrow feel that you'd be moving through. It creates a very, very narrow understanding of all the complexities of your instrument. So yeah, just listen. Just really, really like listen. I'm going through this a lot faster than I thought I would. Next up is going to be a step 4. This is a 5-step plan. Would be to do research. Now, this is research mainly into equipment and or what you're going to need, equipment or software. So look into equipment, instruments if you're playing an actual physical instrument, or you could also be doing like DAW work, and also lessons. Now, there's a note here because a lot of people, I think it's easier to do this, but a lot of people try and learn music entirely by themselves, and that's very possible. Like, you can do it, and it's a path you can take. But if possible, I highly, highly, highly recommend sitting down with like an actual instructor at least once, preferably at some regular interval, just because they can help you catch things that won't hit you until a lot later and give you a very solid foundation. Like, for example, there's a lot of people that will try to like learn an instrument by themselves and get really bad technique. And bad technique can not only hamper your playing, but can also lead to injuries like RSIs and cramps and all sorts of really, really unfortunate, not good things. Like RSIs really suck ass. So if you can, try and find an instructor. Like if there's a high school near you, they'll probably have an instructors list or have a music program. Music stores also normally have instructors lists. But really, really try and sit down with an instructor at least once to try and get the like good, solid fundamentals that you can build upon. Because if you don't have a good foundation, your building will crumble. Like somewhere down the line, you'll try to learn the song and then your hand will cramp up and you won't be able to use it for like a week, and that'll suck. In addition, this is something I think Alex pointed out in one of his parts, but when you look for gear, don't fall into the gear trap of just buying really expensive stuff because it looks shiny. Like, I think this is something that's in almost any hobby that involves gear. Just make sure you have good gear, and that doesn't have to be expensive. But that being said,
not necessarily even good gear, just the right gear.
Yeah, exactly, the right gear. And like, I mean, just good as in like something that will work, something that will last you,
right?
Something that will get the job done. That being said, don't buy instruments off of Amazon or from like Costco or other big box retailers. Don't do it because they're gonna be crap. Because I'm gonna use saxophone as an example because like that is what I know. But a good saxophone will cost you some money. They're like, a saxophone that will not break immediately is not cheap. You're gonna have to pay like,
cry a lot once instead of a lot later.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like, a good saxophone, even if you go vintage with like, I'll talk about vintage in a little bit, but like, it'll run you at least $500 on the very, very low end. And you should be buying from a known brand in the saxophone world, or at least in the music world. Some examples are like Yamaha, Eastman makes saxophones. They're not fantastic, but they work. If you want to go really fancy, Yanagasawa, but don't if you're starting out. Selmer and Selmer subsidiary lines, King, Con. Just do some research and make sure you're going for a reputable brand, because there's like a saxophone is, I'm once again just speaking from experience, but this is like this for most wind instruments. A saxophone is a very easy thing to get the basics of, but it's the very, very subtle things that will make or break the instrument. For example, like blue steel springs, I should say, are really good, and you should try and have them. And if you don't have them, they can break. Or example, another thing that a lot of people skimp on, pad quality on a wind instrument or on a woodwind instrument. Having good pads is so important because repadding an instrument is incredibly expensive. Like, it's like $50 per pad, and there's maybe like, I want to say 30 or 40 pads on a saxophone, something like that. So make sure you have something with good quality pads. Like, actually, I had to repad 3 on my saxophone, and it cost me so much. But yeah, so make sure you have good quality gear. Or not good quality, but not cheap crap gear, I should say. And make sure you're buying from a reputable retailer. If you want to go online, I think Reverb is an option, Woodwind, Brasswind is an option. But if you can, this is a really good segue, try and buy from a local music store Not even because like support local business, all that like ethical stuff, but they have stuff a lot cheaper, at least in my area. Like the two big music chains for like equipment, there's like Music and Arts and Guitar Center. They're like one super organization. There's a local shop near me that has stuff for so much cheaper, like so much cheaper. And a lot of the times people at the local shop will be a lot more knowledgeable because they'll tend to be more specialized. But yeah, so if you can, try to find a local spot. And like I said, vintage. So if you're buying this one, this applies to acoustic instruments and electric instruments as well, like guitars and stuff. But vintage is an option, and you can save a lot of money if you go vintage. But you should make sure you're buying it from a reputable vintage retailer. And keep in mind, it should be a place that specializes or at least has a focus on vintage. And if you can, and you know what you're doing, you should inspect it yourself. Because another characteristic of vintage instruments is that, like, when all the instruments come off the production line, they'll be pretty similar, right? But as time progresses, they'll like diverge in their characteristics. So you should try and play it before you pick it up. Because I think a great example is my brother recently rented a Squier Stratocaster. Squier is like a subsidiary of the really big brand Fender. It's like a super famous in guitars. And it wasn't even vintage, just a bit older, but it played fantastically, so much better than a Squier should. And on the other side is like vintage guitars that are kind of crap because they weren't taken care of. Like, you know, people didn't like align the truss rod. I don't know my guitar terminology like at all, but they didn't really like take care of it properly, so it'll come out crap. Once again, in the world of saxophones, the king of vintage is the Selmer Mark 6, but those are like $6,000 on the low end. So like if you're a beginner, just don't. It's not worth it. I mean, it is, but like not at that level. In addition, Buescher is a really good company. I'm not sure if the original company's still in business, but in like the 50s and 60s, they were a company out of Elkhart, Indiana that produced, they're all made in America, silver plated, very good instruments. Just you have to once again look out for all the trappings of vintage.
So I think what you're saying is I should go buy Trigger as soon as I can.
Good luck with that. You'd have to like assassinate Willie Nelson and steal it from him.
But I think that's a good quality vintage guitar, right?
It's a very Willie guitar. That's actually a really interesting like Trigger. So there's a famous country artist called Willie Nelson. He has his guitar. It's called Trigger, and it is his guitar. Like there is no other way to describe it. Like he has worn a second sound hole by playing it. It doesn't matter what happens
to that guitar. It's still his guitar.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's
a giant hole in the front,
exactly.
But it's still his guitar.
It's not the sound hole. Like the story is like he would like the way he picked was really frantic, so he'd scratch at the wood of the guitar, and he plays so much it just scratched a hole in the guitar. That's a very unique sound, and if you want it, you'll have to assassinate Willie Nelson and steal it from him, because there was one Trigger, and it is that one, and the cost of it is like the cost of a bullet and a true shot.
Because it's probably going to a museum after
exactly.
he dies.
That's why you assassinate him and steal it before it can go to a museum.
Yeah.
So
but also good luck with that, because no, you're not going.
Yeah, you're not. Don't shoot Willie Nelson. We don't endorse killing Willie Nelson. He's a national treasure.
He is.
And I think I used I don't need to put that word. Okay. And the final step, just get started. Just go out and make some music. I think so many people will spend a lot of time doddering around like, oh, I don't have enough money for this. Or like, I mean, if you don't have enough, like if that's a legitimate constraint, it's a legitimate constraint. But like, oh, I can't get exactly this stuff. Just get started. If you have to cut corners on gear, cut some corners. But just get started and just do it. You'll sound like garbage at first. And that's just how it is. But everyone sounds like garbage at first. Like literally everyone. And as a sub note to this, just practice. Like, you're not going to learn well in just having a couple of sessions a month, right? It's much better to play for 20 minutes multiple times a week than to play for 2 hours straight once a month. Just make sure to keep practicing, practice regularly. That's really important. Practice often, practice when you can. I think a technique my 6th grade band teacher told me to do was sit down, put on your evening TV if you still use cable, and in the commercials, pull out your instrument and play for a little while the commercials are running. Just make sure you're playing. And that, more than anything, is the most important part. Like, I think a really good example of this is in saxophones, right? People like to have really specific gears. Like, they'll have, I want this mouthpiece with these specific reeds filed down just a little bit on this body. But a professional, like a real good saxophonist, will sound pretty much the same on any setup. You can get the cheapest crap ass setup in the world, and a good saxophonist will still sound good on it. And that's a lot of it just because you have to have good technique, which also comes back to why I should have lessons. Make sure you have good technique, because I know saxophonists too. So for context, right, the way you play saxophone is you have this thing called your embouchure, which is the way your lips are set up around the mouthpiece. The correct way to tongue is to have the tip of your tongue tap against the tip of the reed. Like, use that to stop the airflow. A saxophonist I worked with a couple years ago, who's like a few grades below me, I was just like helping him and stuff. He stopped his air by not blowing. And because of that, his articulation wasn't nearly as clean, wasn't nearly precise, and like he had a lot of trouble breaking that really bad habit. So make sure you develop good habits. So yeah, just practice. It's the main thing, just practice. And I'm just going to close this off with a few recommendations for like products and resources. So I think this is mainly aimed at jazz players, but if you're going to buy a book, right? If you're going to buy a book of sheet music, buy The Real Book. The Real Book is a publication put together by Hal Leonard, which is like the titan of music publishing. And it is basically a collection of just hundreds of jazz standards. And like jazz standards are basically just songs that are quite common in the repertoire of jazz music, because there's a lot, like, the whole notion of like artist exclusivity is a lot more loose in jazz. Like, for example, a classic is Autumn Leaves, right? Every artist has played Autumn Leaves, right? Autumn Leaves doesn't belong to anyone. Like, I think technically it was pioneered by Nat King Cole, but Autumn Leaves belongs to all of us. And so it's about your interpretation, right? So pick up The Real Book. It's so good. It's fantastic. It just has, like, it also helps with sight reading too. If you like, I think sight reading is a good skill you should work on. It's like, oh, you want to learn a new song? Okay, random number generated between 1 and like 450. All right, we're playing that one, and then you play that one. It's a fantastic tool. I highly recommend it. And in addition, it's always good. I like to have notation software, and I read music. I don't do tabs because saxophone doesn't have tabs. Here's the thing. I use MuseScore as an online music, like sheet music source, but I use Noteflight to transcribe because I really hate how MuseScore feels. Those are both like notation. Okay, MuseScore is a site and software. Noteflight is a web app. I use Noteflight. It's great. A couple of YouTubers that just came off the top of my head. Adam Neely, Jeff Schneider, Tim Collins, they all do good stuff. There's like a whole community, so once you find one of them, they'll collab and you'll kind of get into the network. Reddit, always great resource. Reddit's great. Just there's subreddits for every instrument, every discipline under the sun. There's a saxophone subreddit, bass subreddit, etc. Get on there. It's really good. And lastly, I'll just go over my setup for my saxophone if any of you guys are wondering. I use my mouthpiece. I use either a Selmer S80C Star or a Theo Wana Mantra, both of which have mouthpiece pads, because if you're a saxophonist, use a mouthpiece pad, your teeth and your mouthpiece will thank you. On the C Star, I use a Saxus SAXXAS. I don't know how to pronounce it. Ligature, which is like a clone of the popular Winslow ligature. It's good. And on the Mantra has a built-in ligature. Also, another thing, try your mouthpieces before you buy them. Like, my Mantra's good, but in hindsight, I would have gone to a different one. Reeds, I use Van Doren ZZs in 3.5, and I do file them down just a little bit. I'll take a little bit of dust off of them. And for my main sax body, I use an Eastman Vaz 10. It works, but I'm looking to upgrade it. Maybe, if not to like a Mark 6, maybe a Boucher or another Selmer. And I think that basically wraps up my bit on music with pretty decent timing at that. Alex, do you have any comments? Anything you want to throw in there?
I don't think I do. I don't know anything about music, so I would trust your input.
Would you? Did my guide seem easy to understand?
Sure. I don't know if I will ever get started back into music, but I wouldn't be opposed to it.
If you ever do, hope this helps.
Well, now that we have the music going, I think it's now time to plant the murder weapon of chat on the crime scene of debate on the 6900 block of Discussion Avenue. Yeet. Also, I'm gonna have to give that nice. All right, so Lovey, tell me about your week.
I mean, actually, since I've been talking for a little while, why don't you tell me about your week?
Gotta take a nice mouth break there.
Yeah.
All right.
Give the listeners a break from my nasalness.
Well, sure. So my week went as follows. So I took me a nice drive back from the Nova general area, and dealt with the oh so wonderful I-95 traffic. It's great, by the way. You should try it.
Fun fact, actually.
Go ahead.
Sorry for interrupting. So there's a subreddit for Northern Virginia, and there's an app for navigation called Waze, and it has a built-in chat. And so I think someone was stuck in I-95 traffic, and in the chat they just wrote, "I fucking hate all of you." I'll see if I can find that, and we'll include it in the show notes.
Yeah, that about sums it all up, and my feelings towards everyone in Northern Virginia almost. But other than that, it's been a mostly low-key week. Been off the schedule from work, so I haven't had to deal with that. Other than a staff meeting that was placed very conveniently after close on Sunday night, which is 10 p.m. You ever just have a meeting at 10 p.m.? Well, I did. And basically, I could have probably come up with all of the points that were covered in that meeting if I just had to think about being a manager at a restaurant. And I'll see if I remember to scan that document that they gave us on. It's just honestly funny at how bad it is. But basically, they just had us sit there for entirely too long because one of the managers wouldn't shut up and just listen to things that we need to improve. So, what else would it be? And I had an idea recently over the past week. So, as you may or may not know from previous episodes, I am an avid amateur radio hobbyist, and I have various equipment that I prefer to keep on the cheap. I don't invest a whole lot of money into it, but I still enjoy playing with the hardware and doing whatever I can with it, even though I don't actually use my amateur license that much for transmitting. I don't have anybody else that I know with an amateur license, and even though there is a lot of amateur traffic in the area, what's the point? I don't really ever join in on the nets and whatever. Even though I did listen to both of the nets this evening. For some reason they have two that are like back to back instead of spreading them out. And a net is just like a bunch of people get together on a repeater, and it's like an organized conversation. But I don't know if I already covered amateur radio stuff, or if I'll have to do that in the future.
I think it's come up. It's definitely come up.
Huh?
I think it's definitely come up.
Yeah, I think it's come up, but I don't know if I've ever gone into detail about what all these terms mean. Maybe you'll have to wait for another episode of Sleep Drunk.
Maybe you will.
And I did me some good old fashioned textbook shopping with my fingers in the air. I've been doing
a similar kind of shopping.
So, yeah, I went and bought my textbooks online.
Yes, definitely.
And I saved a ton of money.
100% online.
I just know the cheapest stores.
Yep.
And I compiled an Excel spreadsheet. Let me pull this up. Actually, it details exactly how much money I saved. And let's see here. So if I were to buy all of my textbooks brand new, like a lot of people do for the fall 2019 semester, my source for all of this was Amazon.
Don't do that.
Not even the on-campus bookstore, which I guarantee you would be probably about twice as expensive.
Yeah. I think I found one instance where I've saved money from the campus bookstore, and that was because Amazon didn't offer rentals on that specific book.
Yeah. So if I were to buy all of my textbooks new from Amazon, which I guess would be the place to do it if you were going to, would be $636.78.
That's also on the lower end. Like, some people spend a lot more.
So I did get pretty lucky in general, but it's not like it matters because, I just save so much money.
Yes.
And let's see.
I also decided to partake in said shopping, and a quick legal disclaimer. We are not advocating any kind of anything. This is for educational purposes only. We are not admitting to any sort of activities of any kind.
That was very vague.
And you can email us at legal@sleepdrunk.net for any inquiries.
It's not even a real email address. But I think that's really the point here.
Exactly. I'm legal@sleepdrunk.net.
And let's see. If I got them used, it would be $402 even. And if I were to rent them, and not all of them are available for renting. So assuming I were to buy them used where I could not rent them, then it would be $140.71. So that's the very least.
That's still pretty good. Like, even like for the... Regardless, that's still very good. But yes, even savings fantastic.
Yeah. If you would like to partake in said savings, a good place to learn how is... I don't know why they named it this, but it's a subreddit called r/piracy. They have a detailed guide on how to do so.
Yep. Once again, we do not advocate any kind of anything. We are not admitting to anything. Email legalistdrunk.net for more questions.
Yeah, educational purposes only.
Educational purposes only.
And that said, I think we should move on before we dig ourselves into a deeper hole. Because we, at our core, are a middle-class American family, we do mundane activities like get our dog groomed. So that happened. I have a poodle. He's wonderful. Maybe I'll throw a picture of him in the show notes if I'm really not feeling lazy.
I was going to say, I think you should.
Looks like a stuffed animal. But that was fun. It was just kind of like funny because he's really socially awkward and he doesn't do car rides very well, but he was really enjoying me having my windows down. He was the dog with his head out the window. Anyway, the last topic that I'd like to cover for discussion avenue is screw pharmacies. I hate them. Well, not even pharmacies, just really the medicine industry. Now, I'm not going to go out here and say
Big
vaccines
pharma
are bad. And speaking of that, I have a funny anecdote to include. Don't let me forget. They just don't understand it. Like, okay. So I had a doctor's appointment earlier this week, the same day I was having my poodle groomed. And I got... I've been on a medicine, and I took a test to prove that the medicine was working. And then my doctor gave me a... Well, I was talking to my doctor about moving to a 90-day period between prescriptions and appointments because going to the doctor all of the time is not cheap at all by any measure whatsoever. And I couldn't really understand why, but my doctor wouldn't. I don't know if it was like she isn't able to or she wouldn't or what the deal was, but she wouldn't give me a 90-day prescription for my medicine. And instead, she gave me 3 30-day prescriptions, 2 of which are post-dated. Not actually... Okay, they're not actually post-dated. That's somehow different, but that's a whole nother topic of conversation because actually, like, post-dating is not legal by the DEA, but this other... There's, like, writing an instruction to not dispense until a certain date, which is not post-dating. It is different. That's perfectly fine. A-okay. So... don't ask me. I have no idea. Anyway, I was frustrated by this because we have some extremely annoying and weird healthcare plan that just makes absolutely no sense. It's through a hospital of all things, and barely covers anything. And, I don't get it half the time, but okay, so they have a discount if you get prescriptions for 90 days versus 30 days, like name brand stuff specifically, because name brand things are expensive and there is no generic of this yet. But we didn't think that it was going to work because we had the 330 scripts, and the pharmacy even told us that it wasn't going to work. But then suddenly the price just like wasn't as expensive as it was supposed to be. Like, we've gotten this exact same prescription filled before, costed about $200. This time it just costed $90 for no reason. So we don't know if we'll be able to keep getting that price or why it even was $90, but it just kind of was. So...
Did you happen to throw in like a YouTuber promo code or something?
They said it was through the insurance, so I don't know if we hit a deductible.
Okay.
They also wouldn't take the savings discount thing that we gave them. They said it wouldn't apply, like it wouldn't give us anything.
It might have been because it was a refill.
It wasn't a refill because
it might have been an initial
there
payment.
are technically no refills with Schedule 2 controlled substances.
Huh. No, so actually, I was going to say, I think that might also be why you aren't able to get a 90-day prescription specifically.
No, like you can definitely get 90-day scripts, and that it's just that my doctor isn't able to write them or wouldn't.
Huh.
But you can get up to 90 days, up to a 90-day supply at a time without seeing the doctor. That's the rules.
Okay.
So I don't really know, but
that's
thanks for being extremely complicated, healthcare industry. Thank you very much. And with that, your week.
Trust me, I understand the pain of dicking around with the healthcare industry. I understand the pain.
It's really awful.
I have had so many prescriptions filled in my life. All right, so with your stuff done and some technical difficulties passed, we're gonna switch over to my section of discussion. I'm gonna go in reverse chronological order because I feel like it, and because that's how the significance of my events has been. Well, also because like not much happened at the start of the week. So anyway, starting about an hour ago, I made myself some dinner, and I decided to pick up some chuck steak. And like chuck is considered like the poor man's ribeye. I paid $7 for 4 steaks. And I used the technique that you should use, like that restaurants use, and it came out really good. I highly recommend it. I think YouTuber by the name of Joshua Wiseman. I'll links in the show notes. He has a video on it. I will put that. I just basted it correctly with butter. It came out really good. So I can eat more steak now because I'm not going to be blowing like 30 to $40 on ribeyes.
Where the hell are you buying your steaks?
I mean, like multiple, because but like back when my family here, we'd buy a couple because like all of us are gonna eat, right?
Yeah.
So,
but still, I feel like that sounds like a bit much. I don't know. Maybe we're just out of touch.
I mean, fair. When we come here in the summer, since we can't buy beef in India, we try to get like really, really good beef because like we can't get beef in India, so while you're here, you might as well have the good stuff.
Yeah. Also, I just kind of realized that I completely forgot to even go into depth on one of my discussion only points, but I guess we'll get into that later.
Huh. S in the chat. So moving back to I think today, didn't do a ton. I played some Destiny, and I've been sleeping pretty badly lately. Like I fall asleep around like 2 a.m., which isn't abnormal for me, but I don't because I have nothing to force me out of bed. I don't get up until like 10 or 11, and so today I had breakfast at 2 p.m. I made a breakfast quesadilla. With some Munster cheese, corn tortilla, scrambled eggs, and roast beef. Came out quite good.
That is a lifestyle.
I'm quite proud of it. I'm trying not to do that, and so I'm gonna hopefully try and get to sleep earlier today so I can wake up. I want to wake up around 9 because I feel that's the time I'm gonna be waking up for college.
Yeah, I've just I don't know. I just hate waking up late. I've not always been like that. I used to wake up late all the time, but this summer I just hate waking up after 10. So I've just I didn't today. I woke up just after 10, but I've been sticking to a schedule of waking up around 9 or 9:30.
See, for me, I hate it when I sleep in past 10, but my body doesn't like leaving bed.
Nor does mine, but I just sort of make it because you know.
I don't know. For me, it's one force overpowers the other. So I'm gonna try and correct that. I might actually use melatonin. I want to say use. That sounds like it's like some bad drug. I'm gonna take like a melatonin supplement. It's like a vitamin. Melatonin is not as dangerous as some people think it is. It's perfectly safe.
Don't be RRA.
Yeah. I mean, if you take it in the wrong dose, it can mess with you. If you're sensitive,
just take it.
Yeah, like if you're very sensitive to it, don't. But it's not like Ambien, right? And last night, I absolutely wanted to describe. I think anyone can appreciate this. Me and my good friend Max, who's like one of my go-to gaming buddies. I'm just like general good friend, right? We're playing some Destiny 2, and we had this moment, this beautiful moment of like unspoken communication that ended horribly. So we're playing this mission called the Corrupted. It's like a strike if you're that's the strike if you know D2. And the way it's set up, we're entering the final boss fight, right? And it takes place like in space, and there's like asteroids floating, like debris and stuff. And so there's like 3 platforms, right? The boss is on one platform, and there's like an item you need to break the boss's shield on the other platform. And the item becomes stronger if you pass it to someone else. You can like throw it, right? So what happened was that I'm on the back platform, I grab it, right? I jump across the gap, right? Mid-air, Max says, hey, pass it. So I pass him the relic, right? The item. I land, okay? I switched to my grenade launcher. We had this like, we knew what was gonna happen. He was gonna throw the item, break the shield. I would come in from behind and do the damage. Right, that was the unspoken plan. Okay, so that in mind, as I land, I pull out my grenade launcher. Right, I rush towards the edge of the second platform. I jump. I narrowly miss a piece of debris that would have killed me. Land on the other side. Her shield isn't broken. There's enemies everywhere. I die. Because that piece of debris that I barely missed, Max ate absolute shit on and died. So I couldn't damage the boss. I'm standing there with nothing to do. We both die. Our third teammate dies, and we fail the mission.
Wonderful job,
we had
guys.
to restart it.
You did it.
We had like it would have been so beautiful. It would have been just like that thing where you've put in literally hundreds and hundreds of hours together. You understand each other in that way. It could have been that, but that damn rock killed him and ruined the whole thing, and it was hilarious. But yeah, that was fun. But yeah, once again, if you play D2 as the Corrupted, it was like we're at the first stage of the boss fight, if you're wondering. But it could have been so. I was going to land from behind and just go to town with the grenade launcher, deal a ton of damage. Would have been great. We both ate. Yo! And not much else actually happened in the past week. I haven't been cooking as much because, like, I don't know, I just kind of, like, I just felt like taking a little bit of a break from like cooking every night, and so I ate out a couple of times. I tried a new place that's been top around here called Kava, and it's kind of like Chipotle for Mediterranean food. It's quite good.
I thought that was garbanzo.
No, it's like a similar concept, but I like both of them. Kava's just a little bit different. Like, they don't have wraps. They have like, it's mostly just bowls, and they also have a different array of meats. But both good. I recommend if you're in the area, I'd recommend getting it. It's quite good. It's not cheap, but it's good.
Personally, I prefer bowls over wraps.
Yeah, me too. So, and not much else has been in the week. I've just been playing Destiny. I got new wheels for my longboard, which was nice. I got Hog Zombies. If you follow us on Instagram, you can follow us at Sleepdrunk PC. I'm not plugging Twitter this time. I'm plugging Instagram. You can follow us there, variety. And there's a picture up there. And now I have something special for you, Alex. I have something special. So,
oh boy,
I know your favorite anime, one that's been described on the show at length. Again. So it's ended, right? It's over.
Oh, really?
Which is a sad thing.
That's good.
Yeah. It was a 12-episode series. I think it ended. All the teachers and students got together. They all got together after they graduated. But I figured, because I care about you as my co-host and as my friend, I thought I'd find something to fill that void in your heart. And so I found a show that goes by the abbreviation Hensuki, which the full title is in English, Would You Fall in Love with a Pervert If She's Cute? So let me set up the scenario. The protagonist is a second-year high schooler in Japan. High school is broken. You do 3 years, so it's like freshman, soft junior, and senior, right? So he is a member of the Japanese calligraphy club. It's called Shoto. That's the name for it. He's a member of that club. And, one day after some club activities, he kind of helped clean up. He called some people he knows in to help clean the room up because the leader of the club's a slob, right? He goes to clean up, and then he's like, hey, I'll close up shop. You can go home early. So he lets the club leader leave, right? He steps out to grab like a bucket or something to like mop, comes back, and he finds a note on the table. And the note is this like anonymous confession of love accompanied by a pair of women's underwear to set the tone for the show. And now the whole plot is, he's trying to find out who it was, and he's like investigating, right? And in investigating, he finds out unique characteristics about the various characters that I'm sure you'll enjoy, Alex. I'm sure you'll enjoy them. So I'm gonna run through all of them because I know you'll love it. So his first candidate is the leader of the club. Like, she's a senior, she's about to graduate, and he's like, I think they have some dialogue. He's like, I think I know your secret, right? And he's like, oh, you know my secret. And he thinks that the secret is that she put the note. And she's like, okay, come to the club room at this time. He goes in, and she's sitting there, wearing a collar, giving him a leash, because Turns out she is into what people like to call BDSM, and that is her secret. It is, I believe, what the M. She is really into the M part. So he's like, oh, wrong secret. He tries to get the fuck out of there. So
as you do.
That's a dynamic that's happening. It's, you know, every now and then she's like, hey, you want to be my master? I really want to be your pet. And I'm like, okay, cool, whatever, you do you. And now his next suspect is like a freshman friend he has. He's a second year, right? So he's like a soft junior, right? His next suspect is a freshman, right? That like, that was really quiet. Then, you know, he talked to her, he helped her open her shell, like, you know, really was a proper, like, helped guide her, right? And so I think she's also jealous that he's been spending time with the senior student, right? And so they decide, she's like, okay, hey, I want you to take me on a date. And I'm like, okay, cool, you know, whatever. So they go on, they do a little date thing. He has a little night moment where like some guy starts hitting on her and he tells him to fuck off. And so she comes like, hey, meet me in the supply closet in the library. And he's like, oh, okay. And so she says, yes, I think you're the one I want to make my slave. She's also into BDSM, the S part. And so she violates the Geneva Convention. That poor man, I feel really sorry for him. That's that one. The next one is a friend of his, like the childhood friend, who is of the same year as him. So like they're both soft juniors, right? And so they're talking. She's been really quiet lately, and like she's been kind of shunning him. And he thinks like everyone's like, oh, of course, everything. Oh, you know, she's jealous, right? Well, so she says, hey, you know, he's like, hey, let's just like hang out, whatever.
I would say it's her, but there's probably like, oh, it's some other stupid BDSM story.
Just you wait, Alex. See, this show, they care about variety, right? So, you know, in the end, he's like, oh, it was raining, so his one friend like heads off, like, hey, you should walk home. So, you know, he walks her home, and she's like. And he's like, hey, is something on your mind? You know, you've been kind of quiet lately. What's the deal? Right. And so she's like, hey, you know, I know we're really good as friends. Like, it's her, him, and then his best friend. Right. He's like, but I want to proceed as a couple. Right. And he's like, oh, what? And she's like, and then, like, I think it really starts raining. So they have to go on the shelf. She's like, oh, he's like, wait, what? What do you mean? He's like, and she's like, you know, I want you to proceed as a couple. And then she runs away. Right. And he's like, oh, shit, it's her. So he confronts her at school the next day. She says the same thing. She says, I want you to proceed as a couple with your best friend. Because unbeknownst to him, she has been serializing a homoerotic manga series based on those two and wants them to get together for inspiration.
There's a lot wrong with that.
Well, that's a subculture in Japan called like the Fujoshi subculture. So like it's basically just women that are really, really into like guys getting it on. That's all good. I don't care. But like that's like their thing. I just meant
like, the show as a whole.
Oh yeah, no, there's more. Don't you worry. There's still two more characters.
My main issue with this is that it's all just so greasy and bad because you know that you could go and find different shows like this all day long and you'd never run dry.
Yeah.
Very, yeah.
But you could say this about like TV shows in general. There's a lot of really bad, trashy TV shows.
Hallmark Channel.
Besides the Hallmark Channel can be started. Besides the point, we still have more characters, right? And so, so later on, right? He's like, okay, cool. So I'm traumatized now. Whatever. The main character. Quick. Side note. So the name of the girl's manga series is called Shortcake, and it's a portmanteau. So the main character's name is Keiki, and his friend's name is like Shoto. And so when you say it in Japanese, it sounds very close to Shortcake. And so like she's also almost doxing him. So yeah, just thought I'd throw that in there. But next character, so one day our main character, he's like, so in Japan, like they have shoe lockers, like you have school specific shoes you have to wear, so like everyone has a little shoe locker. He goes up to it and he finds a picture taken from some sort of angle of him and the senior student in a compromising position, and of course it's trying to blackmail him, right? And so he thinks, oh, they call the mystery person the Cinderella because it's like the glass slipper Cinderella, whatever, right? And he's like, oh, is Cinderella trying to blackmail me now? And so he follows the instructions, and there he meets a younger looking student wearing a hoodie. And long story short, she's into stalking, but she's stalking his best friend and wants him to help her because his best friend's weird and is into younger, like he likes younger people. I'll put it that way. How young? Interpretation he hasn't done anything illegal yet. He has not broken any laws.
Oh, but wait, it's anime. They're actually 1,000 years old.
Oh no, this takes place in real. Actually, they make a joke. They make a joke about that, which is pretty funny. Like, he's reading like a manga that has that exact title, but this takes place in like the real world, and so they're not actually like they made a joke about that. They make a lot of meta jokes actually. Like, content aside, the writing is actually pretty decent.
I was gonna say
like,
this.
They have
I feel
smart
like there was
dialogue.
actually some sort of production quality. Still, the topic is garbage, but there is at least some thought that was put into this one. As where the other one is just garbage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because you can tell this also has 26-minute episodes. These have full-length episodes. So, but actually, I think the writing is actually pretty good. Like, the writing is smart. But yeah, so... And so she wants him to help her get with his best friend. That's a developing plot line. Now we come to the final character as of late, right? The show's halfway through. We're 6 episodes in. It's a 12-episode season. So halfway through, right, they introduce another character. She's the same year as the main character too, and she is the student council vice president, okay? And, she's like a pretty studious person, she's quiet, works really hard, and I think at one point, right, he's going up this, like... He was going up the stairs and she slips and he catches her and stops her from falling, right? Just because don't let someone fall down the stairs. It's a dick move, right? You shouldn't do it. And so, and they kind of sit for a little bit because out of shock, right? And it's they're like, oh, this is a romantic tension moment, whatever, right? And it also turns out that she might have had access to the room in between when the note, because what happens is that in the start of the show, right, he left, got the bucket, came back. There's a period of time where someone could have accessed that room. There's a limited period of time, and the room was locked too, so someone had to have had the key. As the student council vice president, she has the key. She has the key to all the rooms because it's her job to audit them and make sure they're following all the rules and everything. So he thinks, oh, is it her? Right, it might be her. And so at one point she asks him to help her pick up some trash for volunteer work. She's all right, you know what, him and his friend who have been helping him plan all of this, right, all right, let's go for it. You can figure things out, right? Shenanigans later, the senior also comes along and shenanigans happen there, right? She falls into the river, she accidentally slips and falls into the river, and so he lends he lends her his coat, the main character, right? They has a show of being nice, right? She's cold, lend her the coat, right? And so later on, she's like, hey, you should come up to the student council room. I thought I want to thank you for the coat, right? And she pulls out some pies, oh, I baked this for you. You can have this pie, and here's some tea. And, they sit down. He sits down, and they are enjoying food together. She puts on some nice... Also, she listens to vinyl. Props to that. That's pretty cool. She listens to vinyl. She sets the lighting down. The room's super comfortable. They're having tea, chatting. And then she just kind of falls asleep because the environment's very comfortable, right? And then he falls asleep too, right? And then he wakes up... And she's trying to steal his underwear, not to get access to his male parts, but because, guess what? Drum roll. She has a smell fetish, and she wanted to steal his underwear so she could smell it.
The obligatory. I hate this.
I mean, I know this is your kind of thing, so I just made sure to go nice and in depth. But to be fair, I think she was pretty open about it. She wasn't trying to. She was yeah, I do. Give me your underwear. And he's hey, no, and leaves. And when you think about it, she could have just roofied him. She went to the trouble of setting up a whole room, getting the music going, setting the lights correctly, baking a nice pie, making everything very comfortable. She could have spiked the pie. That's all I'm saying. She didn't have to try and knock him out because she fell asleep too, and she didn't mean to fall asleep. She was trying to stay awake, but she did. So if I was her, I would have just roofied him.
We don't advocate that here. It's
no, we don't. We don't advocate any kind of anything. Once again, legal at sleepdrunk.net for any legal questions, but we do not advocate anything of any variety. And yeah, that's been my week. I guess
interesting week. Great.
That draws the discussion avenue to a close.
Yeah, I'll definitely
Alex,
not give that show
regular
a
updates every week. I'll make sure to keep you informed.
I'll definitely not check that show out as soon as I get a chance.
I know you love it.
And as far as the things that I forgot to cover, I just moved on to the next topic halfway, or not even halfway through. I was talking about my idea that I had this week.
Oh yeah, for your car antenna.
Yes. So
it says in the show notes.
I was just kind of looking at my FM antenna, and because I have all this equipment, I obviously have a mobile radio in my car. My current setup is just a mag mount antenna that's thrown on my trunk. Not a big footprint, still a little ugly, could be better. So obviously the ultimate goal is to have a through-hole mount antenna, which just kind of sits on your car. It's not ugly. There are no cords. It's just there. It works very well. It's like the standard. And a lot of people avoid that with mag mounts and trunk lip mounts and stuff like that. But I wondered, is it possible to take advantage of the stock body hole, which there obviously has to be underneath that FM antenna, to make my own through-hole mount since I don't use the FM in my car anyway? So I checked it out, and I went and ripped out, kind of like pulled down the headliner, which is an absolute pain in the by the way, and got some measurements on the stock body hole, which is odd. It's like a 2 by 3 centimeter rectangle that has a little protrusion out of one side. It's stupid, but I researched a lot online, and I actually started a thread on Radio Reference, which is a great site to go to if you ever have any questions about amateur radio, or you would like to look up just general information, frequencies for public safety and other agencies in your area, stuff like that. Just a great resource. And I devised a plan where I went to Lowe's and I grabbed 2 fender washers, the 1/8-inch thick ones that are 2 inches in diameter on the outside and a 1/2 inch in diameter on the inside. And then I painted one black, and the plan is to put the black one over a rubber one of the same size and put that on top of the hole on the outside of the car, and then put another one underneath the hole, and then put it like a standard NMO mount, that's they're called, through it, and then put an antenna on top of that. So I ordered some stuff, and that'll be coming in the mail shortly, and I'll let you know how that worked. But
I'm looking forward to it.
I have some high hopes for that.
Yes.
And the other thing, it was related to the anti-vax thing. So I saw a post online that I just thought was hilarious, where somebody said they were working under a doctor that knew the perfect comeback to an anti-vaxxer. The doctor was talking to this patient that was just going on and on about all these reasons why she wouldn't vaccinate her 1-year-old. Sticking it to Big Pharma. Yeah, don't do that. But after she finishes her whole soapbox statement, the doctor says, "Have you considered the possibility that anti-vaccine propaganda is an attempt by the Chinese or Russians to weaken the United States population?" And then the poster of this just kind of says, "There was almost an audible noise where her brain just broke."
That's fantastic. That is absolutely fantastic.
All right, so now I think it's about time that we cover some things about photography, right? So I'm going to go in the same general order as Lavi, just because it's a good order to go. And I honestly came up with, I just wrote a lot of these notes before the show because I have a bad issue of knowing exactly what I want to say until we start recording. And I just happened to come up with them in the same order because it's just a good order. Mm-hmm. So first I'll start with my background in photography. I don't have really any sort of actual background in it. I've took a few, more than a few photos with my old camera that I got for Christmas when I was like 8, and my cell phones over the years. And, that was all cool and good, but it's like, okay, I mean, probably anyone can do that, but, whatever. And then suddenly I just got an interest in the whole thing, through YouTube, and it was actually more in video, but it just sort of transitioned into photography because the equipment that you use is obviously similar. And I think for starters in video, the best equipment that you can really buy is general photo equipment, like just regular cameras. And I invested in some equipment, and it's changed over the years, but for the past long while, I'd say probably 3 years, I've had the same camera body, and somewhere along the way I got a new lens that I absolutely love, but I'll talk about all that later. So that is actually a good transition into the terminology guide, right? So I'm going to start with the makeup of a camera. So basically you have a camera body, which is the thing that takes the photos and puts them on another thing that you put in the other thing that you call a computer, and then you do whatever from there. But the camera body consists of different parts depending on what kind of camera body it is. So there are two main design pools. There's the single lens reflex, or more commonly known as the initialism SLR or DSLR, which is probably something that you've at least seen somewhere at some time. And that is, the DSLRs are the big boys that you see a lot of professional photographers use, and they're built like the older regular SLRs that were used with film. And the reason for DSLR's existence is just because of the known interworkings from film. Like, it's just an easy, obvious way to move on into the digital realm. And what SLRs really are, like, they're just a pretty basic design, is the light from whatever setup you have in front of the camera, it goes into the camera body itself, and while you're just looking through it, it reflects off of a mirror, which is like at about a 45-degree angle, and goes upward into a weird little prism thing, and then goes out into what is known as the viewfinder. Hopefully you know what a viewfinder is. It's the little
it's tiny, the
eye hole thing that you like put your face up to, and you look through, and you can see what the heck you're looking at. And there are cameras that don't fall into these two categories, like Leica cameras, to name one. Their viewfinder is completely separate from the actual lens, and yet they're still really good. Not saying I necessarily recommend getting Leicas. I do believe they're overpriced, but anyway, that is another.
Aren't they known for having a very distinctive look?
Yeah, a lot of the hipster/vintage crowd is getting into those.
Yeah. Actually, fun fact, a person you like, Sven Raphael Schneider, Gentleman's Cadet, he actually disavows Leicas. He's a Nikon guy.
Well, Leicas, yeah. It's a really niche field because of the way that they don't use the single lens reflex body, and nor the mirrorless body, which is the other type. And mirrorless bodies are the kind that has developed in the digital only world because of the way that digital cameras work. Right? So the way that digital cameras work is there's just a big piece of silicon called the CMOS sensor. I don't know what that honestly stands for, but basically it's just a large surface that is sensitive to light. And if you focus light on it properly, then and read from it properly, then you can discern an image from that. So a mirrorless camera keeps the light. I forgot to finish the single lens reflex thing. So the loud noise that you hear when you take a photo with a DSLR or a regular SLR camera is the mirror actually mechanically just moving out of the way. Like it just drops, right? And then, and I don't know if you've ever taken a photo with one of these cameras, but you'll notice the viewfinder suddenly goes black when you take a photo. Yeah. And that's because the mirror drops out of the way and the light is no longer reflecting up into the viewfinder and is instead beaming directly onto whatever photosensitive material you have inside the camera, be that a CMOS sensor if you have a DSLR, or 35mm film, or whatever other weird kinds of film that you can find.
If you're in the 1800s.
I don't even know if that was a thing, but maybe, probably.
I think they were called slates. Like the really old cameras, they use like this large thing that has super long exposure time, but whatever. Yeah, continue.
Like pinhole cameras, I'm assuming?
Yeah. I think they were called slates. Like, that's what they called the actual things, but...
Yeah.
I think.
But mirrorless cameras rely on that sensor all of the time, even for the viewfinder, which is either a tiny screen inside of a regular viewfinder port, like you might, have... Like, it's similar... Basically, something similar to a analog viewfinder, or just a regular screen. And that's probably how your standard cameras that you see tourists go around pointing at lighthouses, that's what they use. But there are higher end mirrorless camera bodies with removable lenses, and the lens is arguably the most important part of your setup. So the lens is the little doodad in front of the camera body itself that has all sorts of different pieces of glass inside of it. And depending on how long it is and where all those pieces of glass are and how they're shaped, the light goes through it and is focused directly on the sensor or mirror that your viewfinder is looking at. And most pools of thought, I believe, argue that the lens is more important than the camera body itself as far as image quality, and I believe I would agree with that.
That's interesting.
Depending on just how bad your camera body is, but it really is hard to find a camera body with a removable lens that is bad enough to where it would make more difference than the lens.
It's actually interesting. I can draw a comparison off that to just jump back to music really quick jump back to music segment. Like lots of people say that in a saxophone, the most important part is the mouthpiece. Like your sound comes from your mouthpiece, not from your instrument body.
Yeah, and it's not intuitive. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, I know. It would seem like it's the other way around. Like intuitively. Yeah.
Yeah. But then there's other kinds of cameras. Obviously, and this is about the digital cameras only. There's the sensors, right? And the way that you measure the sensor size is still based on 35 millimeter film. So there are full frame cameras where the sensor is exactly the size of one frame of 35 millimeter film. And then there's the cropped sensors. That's what they're called. And most notably, there's the APS-C sensors. Well, at least that's what Canon calls them. And there's DX, which is what Nikon calls them. I think APS-C is more of the common terminology. Really dumb why there has to be differences between those two, since they're like the main players in the field. Except for mirrorless, where Sony and what's the other one? It starts
Canon?
It's like a sub of Panasonic. It starts with an L, I want to say.
I think it's something like an X too. Hold on, look it up.
Anyway, there's a lot of other players in the mirrorless field, most notably Sony with their Alpha series, which I hear is very good, but they do eat batteries due to the way that it uses the sensor all of the time.
Also, I think it is Lumix, Panasonic Lumix.
Lumix, yes. Yeah. And the DX/APS-C sensors are about 2/3 the size of full frame cameras, and what that does is basically reduces the it basically zooms in the photo. If you were to use the same lens on a full frame camera and then move it to a crop sensor, the photo that you took with the crop sensor would look like it was zoomed in, but really it's just because the sensor's smaller, so it's picking up a smaller area of the light. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
All right. And then there's the different basic kinds of lenses, right? So there's the prime lenses. Those are fixed focal length lenses, where really all the moving parts are just about focusing. Then there's telephotos, which are meant for zoom, what am I trying to say? They're made for faraway subjects or portraits, most notably. And the reason telephotos are used for portraits, a lot of people don't understand this, and they think that you should take portraits close up. That is wrong, because lenses like wide-angle lenses and fisheye lenses, which are two different kinds of wide-angle being lenses that are meant for capturing a lot of field of view, and fisheye being an extreme of that, they distort things that are close to them, right? So it can just make people's faces look weird. So if you're taking portraits and you want your people to look good, take it with something like 50 millimeters or above, preferably 85 to 135, somewhere in that range. And that is focal length, which is, I want to say, I'm not actually sure. I'm pretty sure it's the distance between the focal element in the lens and the sensor itself. And basically, the higher the focal length, then the more zoomed in the image that you get, right? So if I have a 14 millimeter or something ridiculous fisheye lens, then there's not a lot of space there. So then I have this super wide field of view, and everything looks funny. And then if I have a crazy ridiculous on the other end of the spectrum lens, like a 500 millimeter, then whatever I see through that lens, it looks like I'm looking through a telescope or a binocular, or a pair of binoculars, you know. And as far as focal length goes, as long as you have a full frame camera, 50 millimeters is about the field of view that the eye would see.
Okay.
If you were looking through that square. And then if you're using a APS-C sensor, then that's going to be more like 35 millimeters. But I don't know that it's more of a multiple thing. You know, like it's a ratio. So
so it's not a linear function. It's like a exponential function.
Not a linear function. And then these are like the specifications of a photo, right? So like if I were to tell you that I took a photo and you wanted to know exactly what settings I had on my camera to get the photo how I did, then you're going to want to know the focal length, the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO. So the shutter speed is literally just the amount of time that the sensor was being exposed to light. So there's actually a little piece that like quickly drops and lets a set amount of light through evenly across the sensor. And that's another reason why, that is the reason why some photos with fast moving subjects, sometimes you'll notice that it's actually more prevalent in videos just because of the way sensors do this. They record the top like a very small fraction of a second before they record the bottom of the image. So it looks like things are slanted if you move it too fast. It's just an interesting tidbit. Anyway, but yeah, the shutter speed is just the amount of time that it was exposed to light. So say I take a photo with 1/60th. That just means that it was exposed to light for 1/60th of a second. And that's a fairly slow shutter speed, but not unreasonable. Maybe I would use that in a low light scenario. If you want no motion blur whatsoever, then you're going to want to stick to very small fractions. But there are uses for slow shutter speeds. Like if I take a photo with 30 seconds of time and point it at the night sky,
you'll get all like the stars and stuff.
I could end up with some cool stuff, but you do have to account for star movement and just stupid stuff like that.
See, it's actually interesting. I think my brother a while ago, there's a trick you can do. If you set your shutter speed to very slow and point at a white wall, you can draw things with a laser pointer, and the amount of time have it records the path. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, light painting is definitely a possibility, and I've done some of those kind of photos myself. Most notably with burning steel wool. You can make some very cool stuff with that, or just fireballs. But that's some questionable activity that I probably shouldn't.
We do not advocate any kind of anything. Legal at sleepdrunk.net.
Yep. And then there's the aperture. So the aperture is one of those fancy words. You've played Portal. You've heard it before. And the aperture logo in Portal is actually a very great way to describe that. Just look it up if you haven't seen it, which I'm sure you have. But it's like a lot of little blades, and the more blades the better, that sort of open and close to form a circle, right? And the wider the circle, the lower the aperture number. It's like gauges, even though it's not technically measured in gauges. And then the more closed down it is, then the higher, and the less light it lets in, obviously. So like open, a lot of light, maybe f1.8 is like the standard lowest, but it does go lower. Like f1.0 is, I think, is the actual lowest. It's like a lowercase f / and then the actual number. I don't know why that's the convention, but it is. And then it goes up to something ridiculously high, like f20 something. And I'll get into what that can do to your photo later in the avoiding... Actually, well, okay. A general way to cover that the aperture has a side effect on your photo, right? So if you have a very wide aperture, then yes, you are getting as much light as that lens is capable of bringing in at once. But you're making the depth of field very shallow. So only a very small sliver of distance of things can be in focus at once. Right? So if I take a photo at the widest aperture, up close to my keyboard, then maybe I could only get one row of keys in focus at a time and everything else will look blurry. But then as I turn the aperture up and, the thing cranks down, then I can get more in focus at a time. Just an interesting tidbit. And lastly, the ISO. ISO, I don't even know what it stands for other than, just International Standards Organization, but it's just a measurement of how sensitive your photoreactive material is. So it started in the days of film, where once you put a roll of film in there, you were set on one ISO, that's it. If you wanted to use your ISO 100 film that you already had in your camera for a dark environment, then you just kind of had to use a flash because, that sucks. You're stuck with ISO 100. And high ISO films sucked because, grain just does that. If you shut your eyes, then your eyes ISO kind of goes up because
it's darker.
Yeah, because it's darker, and then you'll see all of that grain in your eyes. Cameras are the exact same way. So you can change the ISO at any time with digital cameras, which is, a wonderful thing. So ISO 100 is generally on digital cameras, that's about the lowest it goes. And that's just what you would use if you're outside, on a sunny day. And as you get in darker and darker environments, you can turn the ISO up further and further, but you do lose quality with that grain. So it's just something that you have to take into account. And moving on to other terminology bits, there's golden hour is something that's thrown around a lot. It's just not even necessarily an hour. It's approximately an hour of time, generally less, before sunset and after sunrise, where the sun is just at a perfect time for taking photos. Really, it's just, the color is good, the amount of light is good. It's not overbearing, but it's enough. And then there's the types of photos. The main three are landscape photos, just, distant photos of not really any subject in particular other than the background. Portrait photos, which is a photo of someone or something. That's the main focus, but there is obviously a background. And then there's macro photos, which is where the subject is in the entire photo. So that would generally be in a close-up.
Yeah, if you want to take a picture of a single keyboard key or something.
Right, and it gets a lot of detail, but obviously not a lot of perspective. So moving along, when you start taking a photo, you have all of your gear together, you want to start taking a photo. The first thing you need to ask yourself, and you won't do this with every photo, a lot of things you just think, oh, that's cool, I want to get a photo of that, and then it just maybe ends up being good, maybe ends up being bad. But anyway, what you theoretically should do is ask yourself, what is the theme or idea that I wish to convey with this photo, right? And then you sort of take a photo that does that, and then you have to use these various bits of knowledge and tools to actually be good at that, and that's what photography is all about. Side note, the tourist effect. Don't take pictures of random that everyone else has taken a photo of, because you're not special. Yours won't be better than theirs. It's been done a million times. Just leave it alone. Anyway, and there are three main ways of accomplishing that with a camera. There are, assuming that your camera is not capable of video, because that's really a whole different beast. There's stills, which is just a photo. Then there's time lapses, where you take a bunch of photos, generally at a set interval over a prolonged period of time, to capture the movement in the space and then put them all together. And those can be great, and they are sometimes overdone, but make sure you're doing them well and you'll be fine. And then there's hyperlapses, where both the camera moves and it's like a time lapse where the camera moves. And it can get a really interesting perspective. It's like a sped up video, basically. But stills is really the main obvious focus of photography. So I'll be talking about stills from now on. And let's see, the tools that you can use to change the perspective of the photo. So obviously subtle details, but it's something that's really looked over. If you have control over the subtle little details in your photo, like what items are there, or what the items look like, or the quality or condition of the items, or the people, or the age of the people, or that sort of thing. That can say a lot towards your desired effect or image that you're trying to convey. And obviously in some instances you won't, such as in street photography, where you're sort of just capturing a candid image of what's going on. You know, you really don't have much control over landscape photos. You know, you're not going to just run out into the distance and just sort of move that mountain, unless you can, which that's pretty cool. Could probably use your help sometime. And the framing of the photo, like how zoomed in you are, just where you place the borders of the photo. Not really a whole lot to say about that. Just like the physical perspective, like where are you in relation to what you're getting a photo of. That's something that you can easily change, and that's not the same as zoom. That's actually how they do that weird effect in movies where the subject stays basically in the same place, but the background like looks like it's stretching or something like that, because that's the difference between zooming and moving yourself. Then there's the color of a photo. I have my thoughts about black and white photos, and I'll get to those later. But other than that, you know, feel free to modify the color of a photo all you want. That's why those tools exist. You know, you can make the photo really muted, or you can pop the saturation, or you can turn down certain colors, or you can just completely shift how all the colors look, or apply a filter, those kind of things. Temperature. Yeah, the color temperature.
And for example, you do that in like Lightroom, I think, right? Yeah,
Lightroom is generally the go-to photography application for that, and for more fine details, you can use Photoshop or like doing it one photo at a time. But Lightroom is generally what you would use for professional photography, and I'm sure there's other softwares out there. It's just that that's the industry standard.
Yeah. Have them.
There we go.
That's right. Staying in.
Then lastly, there's the light and exposure. So those are different but similar. So if you have control over the actual physical lighting in the scene, then by all means take advantage of that. Like if you can block light out and you want to get a dark, grim photo, then that is a possibility. And if you want to add more light, then you can buy photography lights all over the place. Just lighting a photo manually is very difficult, because the shadows and the obvious, hey, there's a light there, and the reflections of it that you aren't looking for, especially in people's eyes, that's something that all has to be taken into account. So you might want to use reflectors or multiple lights to cancel out shadows, and it takes a lot of time to stage that kind of stuff. So if you can't do that, then get it at the right time with the natural sunlight, and then if it's still not perfect, then you can adjust the exposure of the camera. And that's really just a fancy word for the brightness. But
yeah,
a photo with a low exposure is just a photo without a lot of light that hit the sensor, basically. And this is all stuff that can be edited in post within reason. More so if you take your photo in RAW, which is something else I'll get to later. But, you know, if you want to portray something that's more grim, or, you know,
like if you want to correct for a place that's already really bright, like
well,
that might
no,
like the place might look really bright.
What kind of themes you would portray? I mean, it's just whatever you would
moody
intuitively
maybe
think that's just the way it is for as far as exposure. Yeah. Let's see, commonly accepted practice. I don't know really where I was going with this. I don't really have anything to say about landscape, even though I put that there. It's just kind of you do you. There's the subject and context kind of photo where you have a subject and you would like to also it's not a portrait necessarily, but you have a subject and you would like to show the subject in the context of the background or whatever else. And with that, you would generally follow what's called the rule of thirds. And pretty much all cameras, even including smartphone camera apps, have an option that you can enable where there's a grid of lines placed on the camera where there's 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines representing the thirds of the frames. So if you are trying to place a subject within context to the background or other things going on in the photo, you're going to want to keep the subject on the third lines of the photo for a nice balance there. You don't want the subject to be in the middle of the photo if they are not the entire subject of the photo. You picking up what I'm putting down there?
Yeah.
And the third is just a great place to put them because it's just enough of them and just enough of the background. Because if you did any less than a third, then they would just be off to the side and you would think that's not a very important part of the photo. Portrait photos. I already said my thoughts about portrait photos earlier, so I don't really want to get into that now again. Macro photos, they're really overused, honestly, unless you have a really good use for a macro photo, like you want to just actually capture a subject that's tiny, or there is something important that just really strikes you about the detail of a subject. That's fine, because the detail of any subject is cool to look at, but really nothing more. So the people that take macro photos just because they're cool to look at, that's why they're overused. So unless there's some sort of something in that detail of the photo that you're trying to portray, don't bother. Get it in, just take another photo, go do something else. And I think with most of that stuff out of the way, because there's no set rules, it is an art after all. That's really all you need. That's really all you need to know to get started. Aside from these tips that I'll give you on avoiding common mistakes. So first and foremost, use a lens hood like always, or if that's not possible, when you can, just because they're really great at blocking out unwanted light like that from the sun that could bleach your photos or ruin them. So if you keep a lens hood all the time, then you completely mitigate that problem and never have to worry about a photo that's been bleached ever again.
And those are like the weird like circular things in the front, right, that go over the lens.
Well, that's another thing that it does help with is removing those, whatever they're called, sun flares, that's what they're called. Try this at home. Take a camera and just point it somewhere, and then take a flashlight and sort of point it towards but not at the camera until it and then move it down further towards the camera until the whole image sort of looks smoky because it's getting the light from the source but not directly. So it just sort of ruins the photo but not completely.
I'm talking about like a lens hood. It's like it's just kind of like it's the circular thing that's like it's like a little visor. It's like holding like holding a hand over your eyes in the bright light. Yeah. Or the bill of a hat. Yeah. Those are just helpful, Generally, lenses always come with them, so just leave them on. You can mount them backwards, but it's very easy to smash your fingers if you do that, so just leave them forwards unless you actually have some sort of space constraint, because a lot of people always freak out about them breaking. It's incredibly hard to break your lens hoods unless you're just really hard on stuff. I tend to not be, so maybe I'm just out of touch, but I feel like it's incredibly hard. Considering the fact that I leave my camera in the bottom of one of my backpacks with the lens hood on all the time, never had any issues. Let's see, using the wrong settings. So I alluded to this earlier. Using the wrong shutter speed can just introduce, on one extreme, using too fast of a shutter speed can just make your image too dark, or using too slow of a shutter speed can introduce motion blur. So always go above the minimum, or below the maximum amount of time, for shutter speed, because you just want to be safe. You don't want to have to deal with motion blur photos and have to take a bunch of photos all the time just in case one has somebody's leg that's kind of phasing across the image. It just looks bad, unless that's what you're going for. Like there are certain things that, that can make it look cool. Like if you're trying to get flowing water and you want to get that effect where the water looks really soft, then you would use a slower shutter speed. That way it all blends together. Yeah. Or maybe like someone who's running across a frame and like you want to make it.
Yeah, if you're getting some like especially sports shots or cars or any fast moving subjects, you're going to want to use very fast shutter speeds because otherwise you're just going to get motion blur. Unless that's what you're going for. Yeah. I mean, hey, you do you. aperture. So I kind of already spilled the beans on this one earlier too. It's if you use too wide of an aperture, which you would want to mostly in indoor situations, you can run into a problem where not enough of the photo that you're trying to get is in focus. So there's just like I say, I was taking a photo of someone's face with the aperture that was set too low. So that way it's too wide open. Maybe I get the tip of their nose in focus, and then everything else is just a little blurry. Those kind of issues can arise if you use an aperture that's too low, and that's really for things below f2, like the common f1.8 lenses. You just be careful with that. You'll learn as you go. And then ISO, just the grain, or if you have it too high in a bright setting, then it can introduce just overexposure in general. So just, keep a watch on those. I recommend not using manual mode unless you really have the whole setting under control. Like if you're just shooting on the go, auto mode's stupid. Program mode is good for beginners, but otherwise stupid. I recommend using aperture shutter speed priority. I prefer shutter speed priority because I believe that's just the best way to stay in control of everything that's going on, but also, be able to take a photo quickly without screwing with all my settings first. Like if I just come across a fast subject. And that's basically where you set your shutter speed and the camera sets the aperture accordingly. And then mostly you always set your ISO manually too. Lastly, there's the flashes. Unless you're really good with flashes, don't use them. And also, never use the built-in flash with a camera unless you're capturing only family photos or something like that. That's not important. Never use the on-body flash to capture something that you're like an actual photography type photo where it's a message that you're trying to convey. It just looks cheap and bad. Yeah, that's really all there is to say about flashes. The overuse of black and white. I really feel like black and white doesn't have a whole lot of place in photography, especially because we invented color cameras for a reason. Like, yes, it makes a statement, but I feel like it's deeper than that. Because everybody acts like black and white is, grim, or it has that angsty vibe. Use it for another reason. Right? There has to be a real reason why you're using black and white. Maybe it's to portray an older vibe or something, but not in a grim or angsty setting, because I hate that. It happens way too often. Just don't. I feel like you can portray the message a lot better by messing with your color and exposure. I already went over the tourist effect. UV filters, they're like clear glass filters that you put over your lens. They're stupid. There's no point. Unless you're using a film camera, they don't do anything for you other than maybe filter out a little bit of the light that you could be getting, or collect dust, or add blur. Unless you're like desperately trying to protect the lens that's behind the UV filter, just don't use them. All it is a piece of glass, probably low quality glass. A lot of good cameras allow you to shoot in two different formats, digital ones that is. You can shoot in JPEG, which is like the industry standard, or RAW. And RAW is, if you have the resources like the software and stuff to go over it in post, always take your photos in RAW, because then you can just screw around with some of the settings that you maybe didn't get quite perfect, which you won't. I mean, that's just how photos work. And lastly, brand loyalty.
It's dumb.
Don't. Like, the people that go around acting like, oh, Nikon sucks, take Canon, or vice versa, or Sony enthusiasts. There's nothing wrong with any brand of camera. Just, pick the one that works for you and move on. I have a Nikon. Ryan chose Canon. I chose Nikon purely because I was going to be able to use some of my dad's older Nikon lenses for his camera that he had, his FE2 body that he had back in the 80s or 90s. And I have gotten some good use out of those lenses, despite the fact that they don't even have autofocus. That's how old they are.
Wow. I think I have a Nikon as well. I mean, my mom has a Nikon that I use mostly because she doesn't use it that much. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just you do you. Whatever works, really. Let's see. There's not actually much to go over with historical stuff. Like, cameras used to use film.
Yeah.
Used to have developed. That's a term you hear a lot, even in the digital world.
Question is, how does a like $5 Kodak disposable camera from a CVS compare to a Nikon? As a Kodak disposable enthusiast, what are your tips on those?
Honestly, I would say that would actually be an interesting way to portray a certain vibe. You know, like if you were going for the
like lo-fi kind of
early 2000s lo-fi family photo vibe
with excessive red
in
eye
the modern day, then that would actually be a great way to get that kind of photo, is to go out and use the kind of hardware that you would have used in the day.
I think that was actually my first camera that I got when I was like a kid, was one of those disposable cameras, actually.
Oh, mine too.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with any individual piece of hardware. It can be bad, but just, it can be bad on purpose. Everything that you do can mean something.
Yeah, exactly. I think low fidelity isn't in and of itself a statement, right?
That is a statement. That's a way to portray an idea. And coming up to the end here, I think some good resources to check out if you have any, if you would like to develop a desire for photo. I can't cite a whole lot other than this, because really this is, as far as I think, all you need. There's an older YouTube channel. They don't even have the same producers anymore, or the same hosts anymore. But DigitalRev TV used to have the same two hosts all the time, Kai Wong and Lok Chung. They're Hong Kong based. Kai Wong he has a British accent, and Lok is native Hong Kongese, and they're just really entertaining. Honestly, they're just wonderful hosts, and they carried on. They have their own YouTube channels now, and you can still watch them post new videos there. But I think the DigitalRev videos that they made are where I started, and I think those are just honestly wonderful. Just a great resource to check out, to look at certain gear, and just learn tricks of the trade. Because, even in reviews and stuff, they'll teach you some things. Like I would watch reviews for products I knew I wasn't even thinking about buying, just to learn other things. And moving into my gear, I'm currently using a Nikon D5200, which is several years old. It was a few years old when I bought it, and I got it refurbished. And then my all-time favorite go-to lens. It's a very nice lens. I believe I bought it used. It was either used or refurbished, but I want to say it was used. And it's just absolutely wonderful. It's a Nikkor N-series 24 to 120 millimeter lens, which just covers the gamut on anything that you would realistically need, given a scenario where you couldn't change lenses. And it has a constant lowest aperture of f4. So plenty of light, good quality, well-built lens. Would highly recommend that, or the Canon equivalent, if you are looking into a decent camera setup. Might be cost prohibitive. I think used I paid $550 for that lens. But camera equipment is expensive. Just don't go overboard. Like, obviously don't get that from the start. The kit lens, obviously I don't use my kit lens at all now, but if you're just getting started, the kit lens will be enough for you. Just to make sure that you're still into the whole idea of photography, because it's very possible that you think you are and you buy all this gear and then you just never touch it a year after. And a lot of people fall into that trap in the consumerist world that we live in.
I think it's like that with a lot of things, like a lot of artistic hobbies. Like even in music, there's thousands of instruments out there that are collecting dust.
Also, I have a rather cheap, actually, I think I did get this one new. Actually, it's a Christmas gift, but still new. For about $180. $180 for a new lens is dirt cheap, but it's just a Nikon DX format lens that is in 35 millimeters at it's a prime. That's it. At f1.8 lowest aperture, and it's just a great lens for indoor settings and low light settings. So it's not the highest quality lens in the world. It has a plastic mount, but it gets the job done. It does what I want it to do, and that's what your equipment is all about. You don't want to get something that's so expensive and you saved up so long for that you're afraid to actually use it. Your photography equipment is just a tool and nothing more. So you want to be able to treat it as such comfortably. Like, don't be afraid to, well, obviously get something that you can afford to do this with, but don't be afraid to jerk it around a little, you know? And then I have a very nice tripod that is, I got this because I still anticipated doing video, and I do use it for video occasionally. And I, by no means would I even honestly recommend a Manfrotto tripod because of just how overpriced they are. Realistically, like, they're nice, but they're overpriced. Don't get an Amazon Basics one. Just get something that's sturdy enough.
I have an Amazon Basics one.
I used to have an Amazon Basics one. It got the job done, but they're wobbly. And you don't want something that's wobbly. That's the point of a tripod, is to hold the camera still.
Yeah. The camera will not fall.
But I guarantee you that you paid less than $10 for it. And that's the beauty.
$8, yeah.
I have a Manfrotto 290 Extra, which is one of the cheapest ones that they offer. Still a great build quality tripod, and you know, it's fairly large, doesn't have a whole lot of features, has that smooth head. That's what it's all about for video. Always keep spare batteries. I always keep at least 2 spare batteries on me, and I have a charger for every scenario, one that's USB powered and one that's wall plug in. Name brand batteries are an absolute waste of money. Don't buy them. They're so overpriced. Oh my god. Just get aftermarket ones that have the chip. Otherwise your camera
won't accept it.
Probably freak out. Wasabi Power makes great chipped batteries. That's what I use. And I've touched on the older lenses of my dad's. I don't really think that's important that we get into that now, especially considering the time that we're at on this episode already. And you know, you might think it's easy for me to say with this kind of equipment, but I've listened to people where I think that to myself. They say this on YouTube a lot. You know, don't spend a whole lot of money on your gear. You know, it's not all about the gear. And then they pull out their
super expensive
5D
Magnum,
1D Mark
duper
3 or whatever the hell the expensive ass DSLR body they have, and act like it's not all about the gear. It isn't all about the gear. It's, you know, as contradictory as those kind of statements might look. And look at me, I have a bunch of used equipment and stuff that I've accumulated over a very long time. This is just what I've ended up with. I haven't had that camera my whole time. I didn't get that camera to start. It's just what I've ended up with. I think your gear is something that you just progress with and get what you know you absolutely need and can demonstrate a need for. Like, if you actually seriously think and have been thinking for a prolonged period of time that you would like to get into photography, and you've been doing it with your cell phone for a sort of a prolonged amount of time, then maybe think about getting a cheaper DSLR, or a cheaper mirrorless one's not a great idea considering that they're still evolving at this point in time. But you can look into a cheaper DSLR like this one, or the Nikon D3000 series, 5000 series. Those are the target for you, or the Canon Rebel T5 series. And they probably have different models out now. That's just what that was out there on the market when I was getting mine. And older stuff is perfectly fine too. There's nothing wrong with an older camera. Megapixels aren't everything. Megapixels are almost nothing, actually. It's all about the actual quality of the camera and the lens, because most likely it won't be able to actually take advantage of those extra megapixels that it claims it has. I think mine's at 24. Just how it be. 12 megapixel cameras, if it's a good body, it's a good body. Doesn't matter if it's 12 megapixels. And I think that's about all I have to say about that, even though that was a lot of things to say about that.
I'll throw in an anecdote at the end about cameras. So this will tie in a little second, but there's a few common trends in the Bangladesh community in most suburban areas. If you can get a black or gray luxury SUV, and there's only one type of camera lens you can get, and that is long. Here's the thing, you never use it, right? What you do is you take it to parties and you show them, oh, check out this awesome new lens that you couldn't fit get through an airport. It just has to be a long, expensive lens that you never use and don't take pictures with. So that way, at parties, you can go and take pictures of your black or gray luxury SUV with all of your friends as you compare your lens sizes and show off your long lens with a very large flash. Like, I'm talking like you attach a flash, like that thing is like could hurt someone.
Huge flashes. It's like half a foot tall or taller.
You take a picture of your family. It looks like garbage because you don't know what you're doing, but like you got a lot of light.
But the camera's expensive, so
a lot of light. But
it's
expensive.
To be good, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you got a nice long lens, nice big flash. That's
nice big black or silver luxury SUV.
Just take pictures of your black, like lots of glare. Make sure you got like really good, like you don't want shadows where like
you're not going to aim it in the correct way. You have it, but you're not going to aim it where it's supposed to be. You're not going to aim it up or anything or diffuse it. You're just going to aim it straight at your subject.
Yep. Just like black or gray luxury SUV, just lots of flash. Very like you like it's the kind of thing where like your lens will be a reasonable distance away, and then you're a couple feet behind because of the length of your lens. Like, that's the ideal. Like, you want a long lens.
Like, one of those lenses that's probably $5,000, and it's, like, they market... They put the lens body in a sort of beige body. Like, only telephoto lenses that are over, like, some ridiculous focal length come in that. You gotta have one of those.
Yeah, exactly. It's the kind of thing where...
The lens is so long that it has its own tripod mount.
Yep. The kind of lens
if you
where
mounted
like,
the camera's tripod mount on it, it would break.
Like the kind of lens where you take a picture and you're using it correctly, you might have to account for the curvature of the Earth. That kind of lens. It just has to be long.
Yes. Remember, size matters.
Yes.
Honestly, in the lens world, size does not matter. Like... you could have a really, really long lens. Like my 24-120 lens is just, I feel like it's absurdly long. I don't know why it has to be that long. But if I focus it at 35 millimeters, it's probably 4 times longer than my 35 millimeter prime lens.
Huh.
Even though it's the same focal length, which makes absolutely no sense. But that's the way it is.
Long.
So, you gotta pick long.
Always just have like the kind of thing where you can't even take it outside because it could like bend and like damage the camera body from the weight. Like it should be
you
huge.
have to hold the lens with one hand and mount the lens tripod mount. Otherwise, the lens would break off the camera mount. And
of course, you have to keep automatic focus off because like you clearly know what you're doing. So of course you have manual focus on.
Of course, yeah. This is still the 80s, You don't have the little thing in your viewfinder that helps you actually manual focus, but you'll eyeball it. You'll get it right.
Exactly, because you definitely know what you're doing because your lens is nice and long. I kid you.
Anyway.
I've seen the long lenses, man. I've seen them. I've been photographed by them.
I wouldn't doubt that at all. That's one of those things where you know it's right.
Yep.
There's certainly, I'm sure, like upper middle class to high class Americans probably do the same thing.
But it's just something I just see so much. I'll see like a balding old like middle aged man come in wearing sandals with this like WMD strapped around his neck.
It really do be like that sometimes. And on that terrible disappointment. Thank you for listening to this episode of Sleep Drunk. Remember that the first person to guess the song of the day on any of our social media or via email will get a shout out in the next episode. The song of the day for episode 25, the last episode, was, I believe it was Dreams by Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah, I think so. I believe
that's the one I threw in there.
Yeah.
It was something by Fleetwood Mac. I'm pretty sure it was Dreams. Yeah, make sure to share the show.
Really helps.
Anybody who you think would enjoy, your family, friends, your boss,
your long lens compatriot,
your long lens compatriot, D tier above drug dealers.
Let them know. And of course, the Sleep Drunk podcast can be found on any of your favorite podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and more. We'll catch you next week.
We will catch you next week.